Hi, I'm Tyler Cohen Wood, guest host for Cybercrime Magazine, and we are at the Global Cyber Innovation Summit in Baltimore. I'm here with Phil Quade, CISO for Fortinet. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
So I have a few questions for you. So you were at the NSA for 34 years, and you moved up to the position of Director Cyber Task Force and Special Assistant to the NSA Director for Cyber. Tell us what you can about your experience at the NSA.
NSA was a fabulous place to work in that it was very mission focused, which made you feel good about the work you were doing, which was oftentimes complex, sometimes controversial, but always meaningful. So that's the good side. It was a very fulfilling type of work. Secondly, it also provided the opportunity to be on the absolute cutting edge of all things cyber, whether it's cyber intelligence, cyber defense, or cyber attack. So it served as an excellent foundation for to grow me as an individual and ultimately make a contribution to that really important mission that the national security community does.
So after your distinguished career at NSA, you switched over to the private sector. What led that decision, and what made you decide to join Fortinet?
The reason I left government service and joined the private sector was simply one of timing, where I said that at a certain point in my career, I'd make the change and take on another challenge. I wasn't running from something, I was just running to something. And that's where I found Fortinet. And it turns out to be an interesting story. When we were doing cyber operations at a large scale in the national security community, we had some strategies we pursued. And it turned out that the strategies that my old employer uses oftentimes had some parallels to the approach that I saw Fortinet starting to take. So specifically, when you're trying to do offensive operations in support of authorized missions in the government, you have to really do things at speed and scale. And so we use a variety of techniques to do that. And those are the same techniques that I saw in Fortinet, and we're doing very, very well, very, very aggressively. We're able to do cyber defense in the commercial sector at speed and scale. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about them, if I could.
Please.
Sure. So if you're in the cybersecurity business, you're in the business of slowing people down. And that's a horrible business to be in. So what I really mean is that cyberspace is all about doing things faster than people could ever imagine, and connecting more people or machines in numbers they could ever imagine. So if you're in the cybersecurity business, you better be optimized around those two things, speed and integration. Fortinet, in fact, is optimized around those two things. We build our own custom ASIC chips to accelerate cybersecurity processing. And second of all, we have a special strategy and technology called our Security Fabric, which allows us to integrate our different products that are a very, very broad range of products, but allows us to do defense as a team. That's important because you don't want to do defense at your point of weakness where the adversary is hitting you.
Right.
You'd rather do it at multiple parts in your network and mount a team-oriented defense. Our Security Fabric allows you to do that. So the short answer to your question is I joined Fortinet because it has some tremendous strategies built into its business line and into its architecture, and allowed me to leverage some of my older experiences from the older but still cutting edge experiences from the national security community.
Wow, that's really exciting. So there's a whole suite of products, but you can also get the products together too.
That's exactly right. The idea of having lots of different products is something that's aged off as in the business community. So 5-8 years ago, a lot of the folks gravitated towards buying the shiniest new object, the best of breed product.
Right.
But what they found now is that they're not integrated, so there's too much complexity in managing and too much expense in managing them. You have all the different consoles. You've heard that certainly.
Oh, yes.
And the integrated approach is one that allows you to take a platform where you can mesh together your over this security fabric, your cloud products, your data center products, your edge products. So they're working as a team, and that does a couple things. One, it's more effective, and two, it reduces complexity. And so that's why we really focus on those two things, integration and complexity management.
Well, that's very exciting. That brings up a good point though. So speaking of the cloud, how do you think the cloud has really changed computing, security for the better or worse, and how can we be assured that our apps, our data that is in the cloud is secure?
Yeah, it's a great question because it seems like every year, maybe every 2 years, there's the next big thing. And a few years ago, it was big data, and there's one, as I said, every couple years or so. But cloud is one of those that it really is as important as it's hyped up to be. It offers a couple things that's really, really important. Number one, it provides the ability to anyone to get access to high performance computing. Very high performance computing used to be the domain of intelligence agencies, weather centers, and maybe those who model nuclear explosions. But the cloud makes high performance computing available to everybody. And as I mentioned earlier, speed kills. Speed is a great thing in terms of cybersecurity. So the cloud brings that to the masses. And of course, the second thing that cloud brings to the masses is big data. That too is something that in fact lives up to its hype. The ability to get context from large amounts of information to supply back out to the edge for further tailoring. And it turns out that I think that those two things, plus a little bit more of it, maybe we can talk about later on, are in fact truly are the underpinnings of, guess what, artificial intelligence, the thing that's massively overhyped today. And what I mean is that an AI architecture is based on, I think, having high performance computing and large amounts of data at the back end, complemented by speed at the edge, so you can tailor that result and do the last mile of tailoring towards your local application. So the cloud, to me, represents an important part of an overall architecture by providing HPC, high performance computing, speed, and large big data analytics. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the interesting stuff that's happening at the edge, what you might be able to do with that cloud-based content.
I would love to hear about that.
Great. So lately I've been talking about a domain that's, I think, emerging out past the edge. So the edge has always been defined as first desktops, then laptops, tablets, cell phones, right? So that's the edge of computing. But I think the edge is going to get real interesting very, very soon. And specifically, there's going to be a whole lot of data out there on physical processes and things. So Fortinet, as you might know, is well into the OT business, operational technology. OT is what's used to help secure and provide safe and reliable critical infrastructures and industrial automation. Fortinet has some great solutions in that space. But ultimately, OT is about securing physical processes and things. Similarly, consumer and commercial IoT is also mostly about instrumenting physical processes and things. And then lastly, you have building automation. Guess what? It's controlling physical processes and things. So what I'm trying to say is that the edge is really going to get a lot more interesting in a very short amount of time, because a lot of data is going to be generated from OT, IoT, and building automation. And so if you have this great cloud backend infrastructure that provides the benefits that we talked about before, you can put that to use. And if you have some speed at the edge, you can do some last mile processing to provide really, really interesting tailored results to those hairy edge applications out there, like healthcare IoT, building automation, we talked about that, embedded systems. A lot of things become very personal because they affect physical processes and things. And ultimately, human beings are about physical things, not cyber things.
Exactly. And I love that you brought up IoT, because there's a big influx of people that are now working from home or they're traveling. A lot of smaller companies, they use BYOD, bring your own device. And being able to secure and segregate, sandbox the applications that are being used for work versus the ones that are being used for personal is something that's critical. And taking those IoT devices off of the network that has really the crown jewels, is that something that that you see as being a potential?
Great question, and almost great leading question. I appreciate that. I think what you're poking at is segmentation. So there was a day when things like patching and segmentation were considered hygiene, things were a necessary evil, but not really sexy cybersecurity techniques. Segmentation has emerged, I think, as the #1 cybersecurity strategy of our day. It's something you need to do with great agility, because what you might want to segment today might be different than what you need to segment next week. And similarly, you need to do it at different levels of granularity, both at the macro level and the micro level. And this is Fortinet's power alley, doing segmentation. in all those ways I just described, with good agility and with varying degrees of precision. And so you want to be able to, as you said, segment off different types of IoT devices, but sometimes you want to integrate them as well. Agile segmentation done with precision allows you to do both those things.
Wow, that is so exciting.
It's an exciting time to be in the business. And with this emergence of the sci-fi domain, the cyber-physical domain, it presents great opportunity for those in the business to actually bring new services to folks that they previously only imagined. Making sure that, as we talked about earlier, maybe your health care is adequately provided, your transportation is adequately provided, things like that. We can really create a great benefit to those in that cyber-physical domain. To folks like in my business, the cybersecurity business, and Fortinet specifically, I think we're well postured there, and that we have a range of solutions across that whole thing, and that whole span. And importantly, we can get them to work together to leverage the strengths of each portion of that infrastructure.
It sounds incredible, and I liked what you said too about that it's something that constantly has to be maintained. It's a living document. It's not like you just install and then that's it. You have to consistently be looking for what the new, latest, greatest threats are. And with these tools, they're sort of doing a lot of that for you.
Yeah, I think you're talking about future proofing, right? You don't want
exactly what I'm talking
buy
about.
or I don't want to sell something to someone that they're going to have to replace in 4 years, right? You'd like to offer them a solution that has the right foundations to allow them to build on it and continue to evolve it. And I think a foundation based on speed and connectivity is the right foundation for a future-proofed architecture. So sometimes you're smart by buying into strategies like that, but sometimes you're lucky too. In my old job, we had a little bit of both. Back at the NSA, we made really some smart foundational decisions, but then once we had them in place, we realized that there's some things that you could do that we never imagined at the time. And that's what having a security fabric, a connected set of cybersecurity systems allow you to do. It allows you to solve today's problems, but also be ready to adopt future solutions that haven't yet even been, not invented, but haven't yet been conceived. A security fabric allows you to do those things.
There's a labor crunch, and I'm sure you're well aware of this. It's expected to reach 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity positions by 2021. That's up from 1 million positions in 2014. How does Fortinet go about recruiting the best talent? How do you upskill people, and how do you make it exciting to be able to get the best talent?
Complicated question, lots of layers of answers.
Yes.
If I could, people don't quit jobs; people quit people, and so I think it's important to make sure that when you do find the right person, you give them meaningful work, you give them responsibility, you give them accountability, and you be a good communicator. So that's just management 101. So I found, knock on wood, that recruiting and retaining is relatively straightforward because we have a good company, we've got a good strategy, and we've got a good environment. That said, not everyone is applying for jobs at major cybersecurity companies like Fortinet, and so it's hard to recruit in those areas. I think what you're hinting at is that we collectively in the community need to solve this at the foundational level. What can we do to create a cadre of people who are well qualified to come in and contribute at all levels of the cybersecurity problem? Fortinet has a program called NSE, Network Security Experts. It's a 8-level training program that we originally designed just for our own employees so they can learn how to keep up to speed with anyone they might talk to on the outside, and of course, aggressively implement our products. But it turns out that training program became interesting to non-Fortineters as well.
I can imagine.
It's a great tiered level of introduction to cybersecurity with gradual levels of increased sophistication. Again, it's called NSE, Network Security Experts, and it's already been taken by hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. So, Fortinet's vision regarding the future workforce involves making training available to people in very, very large scales. And those people can come in and be introductory cybersecurity folks in any company in the world. And then at that point, you need to do some type of mentoring to get them up to higher and higher levels. It's almost like the Middle Ages old guild model, if you remember that, where you have apprentices, journeymen,
I don't remember it. I
masters.
wasn't.
Sorry. You remember it from your middle school textbooks is what I meant. Sorry about that. Right, you have apprentice level folks, lots of them, and those apprentices turn into journeymen with some training and education, and then at the very tip you have masters, and they're at the tops of their craft. I think long term we need to think of the cybersecurity workforce and that maybe borrowing some ideas from the guild system.
Absolutely. Do you think this program would extend to the consumer market? Do you think that it's important that cybersecurity is part of everybody's job function?
The answer is a clean yes. This year, Fortinet became a founding member of the World Economic Forum's Center for Cybersecurity. So, of course, WEF, the World Economic Forum, is about raising the tide that floats all boats throughout the world, making nations become better within themselves and helping nations treat each other better, WEF. The Center for Cybersecurity is a means to help do that. So as a founding member, what we're advocating and helping to implement is a training program that would allow this type of basic and advanced cybersecurity training to be available to the masses. And that gets back to your earlier question, what's the scalable way to create the number of qualified people to work in the cybersecurity business today? So 10 years from now, we're not talking about those numbers you talked about earlier. So we're leveraging our participation in the WEF in an attempt to scale training worldwide.
Wow. So what do you think we can do to start preparing our younger kids for this workforce of tomorrow?
Talk to them every night at dinner time. If I could, a little personal story. Recently, my daughter graduated from college, took a job in Colorado, was moving back to this area for a different job opportunity. And at the top of her resume, she said she wanted to, do these data science-oriented things. And then she said, "And I want to work for a noble cause." And that told me that all our dinner time conversations over the years had kind of stuck with her. It meant that she wanted to do something that's important and can help food on the table, but also give something back. And so it's a long way of saying that cybersecurity, I think, without too much of a stretch, is a way of serving our country. Our critical infrastructures are things that not only serve our governments, they underpin our private sector, and they help ensure our personal well-being. So we really need to do the right thing to make sure that they're safe and reliable. Well, not everyone can serve their country by putting on a uniform, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. That's one way, honorable way of serving the country. But you can serve your country by making sure that our critical infrastructures are safe and reliable. And I think that we have a responsibility, our generation of people have the responsibility of conveying that opportunity, that need to the younger folks, to see that these opportunities to do good things, make some money, provide good value to shareholders, address customer needs, and serve the country at the same time. I think cybersecurity is the opportunity to do that.
We know that data exfiltration is a serious concern to businesses, but do you think that the manipulation of data or deletion of data or locking out of data like ransomware does is just as critical of an issue?
A definitive yes, right? The big three security policies you want to enforce are C, I, and A: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. For a number of years, a long number of years, maybe decades, folks focused extensively on confidentiality for good reason, keeping data from being read by the wrong people. But in some sectors, integrity, meaning ensure that the data is accurate, not changed, is just as important, if not more important, than confidentiality. Meaning it's probably more important to you that your bank account statement has the correct number in it rather than someone knows how much money you have in the bank.
Yes.
Similarly, availability, the third of the CIA triad, is extraordinarily important to critical services. So get back to critical infrastructure. If you talk to the critical infrastructure folks, they don't talk so much about confidentiality, but they sure talk a whole lot about safety and reliability, availability. Because if those services aren't available to those who depend upon them, our economy crumbles, our governments don't work the way they should, in our pursuit of health and happiness, and is just not possible without water and electricity and transportation, stuff like that. So that's a long way of saying that I think you nailed it, that integrity and availability are more important than ever. They've probably been underserved for a long time, and it's on us collectively to make sure that we're addressing all three of those needs: confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Especially in certain sectors like
Especially.
healthcare and
Absolutely. Healthcare is integrity and availability are the preeminent services in healthcare.
Absolutely. So what would you say to small businesses, because they're in kind of a different area and they're being attacked pretty frequently? What would you recommend for them?
A couple of things, and it's a pretty broad question. I'd start with some fundamental cybersecurity strategies, like, and you mentioned one of them earlier, segmentation, right? Make sure your network is well segmented, number one. Number two, future-proof your networks. Make sure it's well integrated so you can adopt the right things when those needs come. Three, make sure that you have really good visibility of your assets and your network and cybersecurity operating status. And there's probably some others that we could talk about, but segmentation, visibility, integration, that's a really, really good start. Another dimension of the answer, though, is look at the potential of managed services, right? So not every mom and pop shop can afford to or is able to hire a cybersecurity guru to run their network. So that's where managed security services come in, where they can provide those services and you can buy them from a set of experts rather than owning and operating them yourself. So that's why Fortinet's dedicated to our partner community. We sell lots of solutions, products and services, but we have a very, very rich ecosystem of partners who can provide a variety of value-added services on top of what Fortinet's products and services provide.
Wow.
So that model works for SMB, small, medium business, works for mid-enterprise, and even the large enterprises. Some things they do themselves, and sometimes they enlist service support for.
It's very exciting. I want to get my hands in the tools.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a little bit of a geek part of you. There's a lot to do, and the good news is that cybersecurity is within reach of anybody. Fortinet makes it accessible both in its quality and cost, and the partners can make it accessible in terms of complexity and making sure that you can leverage economies of scale.
So, if there was maybe 1-2 pieces of advice that you would give to new CISOs that are coming into the field, or even older CISOs, what would you want for them to know?
We've talked about a couple of them, and I'd say do segmentation really, really well. Segmentation is a strategy that, number one, it prevents breaches. Number two, it minimizes the scope if you are breached. And number three, it allows you to recover from breach much, much faster. So make sure you segment really, really well, number one. Number two, make sure you have great visibility because you can't defend what you can't see. And then probably number three, I'd add in reduce your complexity, right? Because oftentimes it's not the hardware or software that fails you, it's the human beings that are trying to operate it. If you make it too hard to do their job, you'll make mistakes because you're tired, you weren't trained, or some other reason. So really work on those things, complexity management, and some of those other things. And then the second one I'd recommend is make sure you can speak the language of your boss and your board. I'm blessed by being the CISO of a cybersecurity company. So you can bet there's a few people around my company that can speak cybersecurity ease. But not all companies are like that. So a CISO has a responsibility not just to be a security or IT geek, but has a responsibility of being able to talk about consequences, because that's what CEOs and boards care about. What are the bad consequences I want to avoid, and what's the overall risk of that happening? Your risk is some combination of consequence, threat, and vulnerability. Don't expect your bosses to be experts at threats and vulnerabilities. Engage them on the things that they can appreciate and give you advice on, bad consequences they want to avoid. So the second thing I'd recommend is making sure you can speak their language so you can translate their intent into cybersecurity threat mitigations and vulnerability mitigations.
That's such an important tip. That is a very, very important tip. So now I'm going to ask you a fun question. So tell us something about you that people may not know, like a hobby, something, something exciting that you love to do?
Right. So thanks for the question. I'm not just a robot who lives and breathes cyber or cybersecurity. It's really important to me. But I'm a family man. I've got a wife of 30 plus years. I've got 3 wonderful children. I love the outdoors. Any day, if I'm not doing cybersecurity stuff, I'd love to be someplace in the Rocky Mountains hiking.
Oh, wow. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. You asked some good questions. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.